G'day. Today we're in for a bit of a treat. Got a 1967 Chevy Impala. And there's a little bit of a slippage there. It's got the 2-speed aluminium Powerglide in it. V8, or the Chevy Powerglide. So we're just going to basically check the simple things first. Check the oil level. Also they have a vacuum modulator, so it's important to check the vacuum line that's hooked up to the inlet manifold, both at the top and at the vacuum modulator under the vehicle. Now I've just removed the air filter there. Now this hose here, you can see that goes to the vacuum modulator. What you need to do is check that the hose hasn't perished. Also, sometimes they put the wrong hose on them, and these hoses collapse under vacuum, especially from the heat of the motor there. And also the little port there, the little T-piece, or T-tree, or whatever you want to call it, the little port sometimes carbons up. They have like a little restrictor plug in there. Sometimes they're open right through. Sometimes they have a little restrictor, so they have a 1/16 size hole. Just make sure it hasn't carboned up or anything like that. So we're going to replace this hose with a proper vacuum hose. Now I found there's a little, just on that selector there, you can see where my finger is. A little bit hard to see, I can't get the angle of the camera right. But it's sweeping out of that selector shaft seal right next to the band adjuster there. Everything else seems okay. He's got an engine oil leak here. And to get the pan off, you have to take off these 2 nut and bolts on either side of this linkage and just swing that out just so you can get to those bolts. The vacuum modulator hose, so we'll replace that as well. Also important to just give that vacuum line a bit of a wriggle and make sure it's not going to be rubbing on anything to wear a hole through it. And also do the same with these cooling lines. Okay, to replace the seal, I'm going to take this little cover off, get that out of the way, and just this little plate here, and then we can disconnect these linkages and slide that shaft out. Just make sure you clean it all before you start disassembling it. Okay, now I'm going to undo, I'll just loosen these Allen key bolts. That one came right out, and then I can slide that whole shaft, selector shaft out. A bit tight there. Oh yeah. There's a little kickdown linkage. Before I put this on, I'm just going to spread this a little bit just so it can go onto that shaft a little bit easier. What happens, that bolt compresses it, and then it's really tight on the shaft. Now I can pull that kickdown shaft right out. There we go. And there's the selector shaft. Now there's a seal that runs over here on the shaft, and there's also an O-ring there that needs replacing where the kickdown shaft goes through. Now there's a seal there. You can just pop that out with a screwdriver, but just make sure you don't damage that housing. And while I've got all this out of the way, I'm just going to readjust that band as well. Now what I actually did, I tapped it with a screwdriver from that angle where my finger is. I don't know if you can see that. And then I could just lever it out with another screwdriver and just come out. You can't really put a tool in there because of that step. You can see the step there. So you can't actually screw in one of those tools to pull the seal out, so you've got to do it like that. Just be very careful you don't damage the housing, that's all. Now I've also just marked that low band adjuster. The band adjustment for these is 40 inch-pound. Go in 40 inch-pound, loosen the lock nut, and back off 3 turns. That's why I've marked where it is. So the space here, because of the exhaust, you can see is right here. I haven't got a lot of room to work, so I'll adjust that band, knock another new seal in. Now the reason I marked the lock nut before I do the adjustment is because it's back off 3 turns, it actually went in 3 1/4 turns. So that tells me that the band was out of adjustment or a little bit worn. So I'll just take a note of where that little ink mark was and back it off 3 turns and tighten up that lock nut. Okay, there's the new seal. Now I've tapped it in with the driver. There's not a lot of room there if you have a look, so you can't really swing the hammer too far, but just get it in as evenly as you can, and until it bottoms out, there's, like I said, there's a little step in there when you knock it into that step. And just visually check that it seems to be all knocked in evenly like that. So there we go. And now we can put it back together and replace that little O-ring on the kickdown rod. Now I've just used some, I think it's 600 grit, and just polished that up a little bit. And there's the new O-ring for the kickdown. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm just going to spread this open a little bit more just so it's easy to slip on or slide on that shaft. It's got little teeth notches there, so you can't really muck it up. It just makes it easier to push that kickdown shaft through there. And before you put it back, just make sure it is sliding on nice and easily there. You can see that one's, I've just opened it up a little bit. It's going on quite easily. And I'm going to do the same with the selector shaft. Just make sure it slides on nice and easily there. And finally, just a little trick. Before you push these in, I just like to mark where that slot is. Because of the confined space, you can't really, it's a little bit difficult to line all up those little teeth on that linkage. So this will just help you find it a little bit easier, that's all. It does take a little bit of wriggling to get it back in. You'll see what I mean when you're doing it. And now I'm going to just put in that the other linkage. Okay, all back together. Make sure it's all working properly. Don't forget this, to put that spring back on. And test your kickdown there. Put your bracket back on. That stops the whole thing from sliding left and right. I like to always push it as far as I can that way, just so it doesn't move too much. But it's up to you. It has to also be fairly in line too. So I'm just going to do these bolts up while pushing it that way. Okay, we've got the new filter back on, and now I'm just going to put the pan back on. Okay, I've got the vacuum line to the modulator, and I'm just going to bend it just so it's actually pulling into the modulator, so that way there's less likely chance of the hose falling out while you're driving along, if that pipe's pulling in. Some people just don't bother to do that, and the only thing that's sort of holding it in place is the rubber. The exhaust, you can see, runs right near there, so it is going to soften that or harden that rubber over a period of time. So just a good idea. I'm just going to bend the pipe up here just so it's actually pulling. You can see I've bent it a little bit over this side. I'm going to do a little bit more on this side just so it pulls right up against that little step there. There we go. It's pulling in pretty hard, so now I'm just going to put the proper vacuum rubber there instead of that hose that was on there. Where'd I leave it? That one there. Okay, all back together. Just double check all your work before you put any oil in it. Make sure everything's tight. I've added an extra washer here just to tighten up that linkage. A little bit sloppy on this side, but still not too bad. And we're going to just top it up with some Dextron 3. We use the Tritech brand here. And we're going to select all the gears. A couple of times. And we're going to check the oil level while the motor's running. We'll take it for a run and then make sure that it's not overfilled or underfilled. Important to not overfill it as well. Or if it hits the spinning parts, it can aerate the oil and just it'll be the same problem as if there isn't enough oil. So it's important because the oil expands with heat. So make sure you check it at operating temperature. We're going to take it for a run now and recheck it when we get back. Now just back from the test run, and you can see I've overfilled it, so this is where the vacuum pump comes in really handy, makes the job easier, take a bit of fluid out. If you don't have a vacuum pump, then you've obviously got to get a bit out through the drain plug, or if it hasn't got a drain plug, then you've got to loosen the pan. Anyway, we'll just suck a little bit out. It looks all nice and dry there on that seal, and double checking around the pan gasket. Beautiful. No transmission fluid leaks. I might just find an extra couple of washers here just to tighten up this linkage as well. Might just improve it a little bit, make it feel a little bit better on the column shift. Thank you for watching.